Hello, this video will cover the new features of version 2020 R2. 2020 R2 includes improvements to the isCOBOL profiler, making the report easier to create and view. Running your programs with the dash profile switch will create an HTML report showing the time and the percentage of total time for each program as well as each paragraph in the program. New options have been added to help you get a better report, including $$ Profiler Library, which turns the compiler on and off programmatically. You would use this especially around except statements. This removes the time the user takes to act from the profiler statistics. And isCOBOL.profiler.excludes and includes can be used in your properties file to restrict the classes profiled. This is useful if your UI is separate so you can exclude those classes, or if you have pinpointed a problem to one program. Now the profiler can be run in any environment, including the application server, an EIS on Tomcat, etc. The report shows a warning if the programs profiled were compiled in debug or if logging was enabled, since both of these cases will affect performance. We've made some changes to the IDE. The profiler improvements have been integrated into the IDE. Also, the isCOBOL Screen Painter now supports manual editing of several sections in addition to the previous graphical editors. We'll look at both of these in the demonstration later. As always, there have been GUI control enhancements. The hamburger menu style has been added to fit the width of a smaller screen. $bitmap can now use glyph font characters. A glyph is a design of a certain character, and in 2020 R2 you can load a font such as Font Awesome and use the Unicode value of its characters as you would an icon, a JPEG, or a PNG. We're going to see that in the demo. No more loading multiple icons or making a large strip. And grid improvements that we'll look at in a minute. Different filter types, case-insensitive searches, and button icons. The Tree View Selection Mode property enhancement means that you can select multiple items with the Control and Shift keys. Our 2020 R2 message boxes have a more modern look. They can be centered on the screen and can now be customized in a separate COBOL program with a variable setting to force each display message statement to go to that program. The web browser control lets you embed a web browser in your screen. And our control's default is to use a browser based on the DJ web browser, with an alternative to use a browser based on Java's FX web view control. But Java FX isn't included in the newer Java installation, so Java programmers will often use the JX browser. It's a Chromium-based integrated browser. To make your COBOL programs consistent, you can also use this JX browser by setting the variable shown here. Every version, we fine-tune our compiler to make it faster. In version 2020 R2, the compiler doesn't need the tools.jar file in the class path, and the Java to class compilation is faster. The test results in the table are times for compiling 550 programs with a total of a little more than 1 million lines of code. Though isCOBOL supports calling C code, there are some cases when it's better to migrate the C code to Java. The main problem when integrating COBOL code with another language is understanding how to code the proper memory structures to receive the COBOL parameters. How are the group variables handled? How is the comp variable stored, etc. The easy linkage feature has been enhanced in 2020 R2 so that it automatically generates a set of Java stub programs for each call statement in the COBOL code, making it easier for the Java programmer to work with the COBOL program by taking care of these issues and giving them a Java starting point. Compatibility with IBM COBOL is enhanced to support the exhibit statement, which is similar to the display upon sysout. 2020 R2 also adds the ability to have sensitive and insensitive cursors in embedded SQL statements. The runtime has some behavior enhancements. You can change the key combination for searching in a screen, formerly always Control F. Now you can specify a different key combination for different types of controls, or block the shortcut key combo for control altogether. You can now hook a program to call and cancel statements and redirect the runtime to a Java or a COBOL class ID program when those statements are executed. automatically connect to a database without ESQL Connect in your program, and supply the username and password credentials in the properties file instead of the URL. And we've added some microfocus dialect library routines for added compatibility to make migrations to isCOBOL easier. For the debugger, now in 2020 R2, the source code is embedded in the program class when you compile for debug. That means you don't have to point the debugger to the source code path, and you don't have to move the source code onto your client PC just to debug, both of which you had to do in previous versions. The code is safely encrypted, but it's still a larger class, of course, and as always, it will run a little slower than one that is not compiled for debug. The console output from a program running in debug, the sysout and sysair, used to be included in the output window. The output window is the one on the bottom left. Now this output is separate, shown in the bottom right window. As part of our company's efforts to help you use continuous integration and continuous delivery, CI/CD, we've made it easier to use isCOBOL inside an Apache Ant script by integrating Ant into our compiler with a new compiler class. Apache Ant is a Java-based build tool for automating software build processes. You create instructions to build your application in an XML script, and you can run the script from a command prompt. However, it's often used in conjunction with automation servers like Jenkins. In fact, variant developers use the Apache Ant plugin to Jenkins so that Jenkins can run builds automatically. We'll review a script and run it in the demo. The new C-Tree version 11.9 that comes with the 2020 R2 includes features requested by our customers, as well as improvements to help you manage your indexed files better. Older versions of C-Tree had a subfolder called SQL in the server folder, but nothing else in that folder. So we've done away with it, and your server DLLs and products are directly in the server folder. Full support for TLS SSL security has been added to C-Tree, so you can define your SSL certificate and add a security layer to your C-Tree client-server communication. You've been able to prefetch records to improve efficiency for a long time, but if you keep them for too long, they may not be accurate anymore. In C-Tree 11.9, you can specify how long prefetched records are kept. We've added RLE algorithm compression. By compressing your indexes, you not only reduce the size of the index, you increase performance. The memory file is used for multiple sessions, but if one session crashes, the memory file might not get deleted, and you'd have an orphan memory file that wasn't deleted when you shut down C-Tree. By setting memory file persist, you can have the memory file deleted when the application disconnects from C-Tree. Performance for bulk addition has been improved, affecting concurrent file open and close operations, especially when scaling to systems with a large number of CPU cores and concurrent database connections. C-Tree is more than a file handler. It's a database project that's smaller, but just as fast and feature-rich as other databases. And if you take advantage of their other features, such as replication and drivers to access the data from other languages, C, JavaScript, Python, VB, etc., you will find our installation more useful with choices to install drivers and tutorials for other languages, as well as a database replication feature. So let's go to our demonstration. I'll start with the changes to the debugger. In this older version, 2020 R1, you can see the two classes that were created when compiled with the -D. One pretty large class, the program class, and an additional class for debug info. To debug this program, I would need all three of these files, the two classes and the CBL source code. In 2020 R2, using the same command, all of the source code is encrypted and embedded in the program class, and no extra classes are needed. To prove this, I'll move the class to a separate folder away from the source code and I'll run it in debug mode. Now while we're here, let's look at the separate console window. Get this running. The output window still shows where you are in the code, while the sysout is redirected to this console window here. The Ant integration sample is part of the isSamples application. This build.xml file is the Ant script that we'll use. The targets are the ant commands that you can use to run parts of the script. We're going to run the build command, which includes the clean, compile, and run command. So I'm going to add the ant tool to my path, and then I'll simply type ant and build. And as you can see, it cleaned, init, compile, and then it ran the program. Let's switch to the IDE, and we'll look at the profiler. Its sample is included with the I/O performance sample, which I have here. And I've already built these. And in order to activate the profiler, I'm going to right-click and run as. And instead of an isCOBOL application, I'm going to go to Run Configurations. I've already set the configuration up for the profiler, chosen my project and the main program name. And then here is a new tab called Profiler, and I clicked on Profiler Enabled. And you can see where I can include or exclude classes here. So I'll click on Run. It switches over to console view, and there's my output. And then a new tab called Profiler comes up, and here's my profile. And I can double-click on these paragraph names to go to the paragraph itself. This is the one that takes the most amount of time, and that's the profiler. The customer sample uses the isCOBOL GUI control set. So let's look at the structural tab and open up the working storage. Now this is what you're used to seeing when you add a variable, but if you have a large amount of working storage that you want to cut and paste in here, we have a new way to do it that's easier in 2020 R2. Notice the additional tab up here called COBOL Editor. I'm going to click on that. And now I can paste working storage data right into this editor, like that. And when I generate and look at my CBL, here is the working storage that we are used to seeing, and then underneath that is the working storage that I added. The last sample I want to look at is the IS samples. I've already built it, and I'm going to run it now. And we'll get this out of the way. And under New Features, we have quite a few options. I want to look at them all. This is the $$ bitmap, and this bottom portion is using the Font Awesome font. And then these hex values here are these pictures. So let's change this middle one, and we'll make it a car, F1B9. Now we have a little car there. The next sample is the hamburger menu, and this is it here. It expands out, and you can see how this would be very helpful on a small screen. Next is the message box. In 2020 R2, you have two options for customizing your message box. You can make changes to the standard message box, or you can replace it by writing a hook program. So I'm going to change the title here, and change this. And I'm going to make it centered, and I'll change the font. And we'll display the message, and you can see the changes that I made to the standard message box. You can also use a hook program. I'm going to click on the custom message box here, and this is our hook program. You can use the same code, or you can write your own. It's in the sGUI folder. And when I display the message box using that hook program, it looks quite different. Then the profiler and the coverage. We can run both the profiler and the coverage together. Let's run this. Start the processing, and we'll show the profiler report. There it is. And the coverage report. There's our coverage. The tree view multi-selection. Remember that if we choose, I'm going to choose multiple intervals, then I can use my control key and just choose certain fields. We can find out which fields were chosen. And I can use my shift key and choose a group of them. And again, find out which ones were chosen. And last but not least are the changes to the grid. The first change is that you can customize these icons, and I've done that here. I've created a different funnel and different arrows and made them a little big just so you can see them better. The instructions to do this are in our documentation. We have new filter types in the grid as well. There are 3 of them. You see this filter here. The first type is no filter at all, like the length column here. Another filter type is shown in the album column. If I click on the filter icon and I take off some of these, I get the filtered contents in this column, and the filter turns red. In this type of filter, if I were to click on the filter icon, it would reset the filter so that all of the rows would show in the grid. The third type of filter is on this title column. When I click on it, and let's say I take off all of the A's and OK, it turns into a yellow filter because that's the icon I'm using. And if I click on it again, it keeps the filter, and I can add more or less. The last new feature that I want to show you on the grids is the search. A Control F will bring up the search as it did in the prior versions, but there are more icons now. There are more options. One of them is the case sensitive or insensitive. And another is that in addition to having the user press Control F to bring the search up, you can now do it programmatically with an action search modification to the grid. If you have any questions, please contact us at the information shown on this slide or at support@variant.com. Thank you.